Welcome to Virtual Gardening 101. This is a place where we dig into the digital soil and reap real results. I want to thank you for joining me for another interesting feature. I'm really delighted to be sharing some important information, and today I will be talking about the importance of light to the growth of plants by drawing on an observation I actually made while I was working. And I'll go into the discussion by explaining the importance of light to plants. I'll be explaining how plants respond to light. I'll be highlighting or giving some indicators that gardeners can use, to determine if their plants are actually getting enough light, as well as the impact that exposure to direct sunlight can have on plants. And I just invite you to stick around for the entire duration because you'll definitely learn something from this feature. These are two abreviate trees, even though they are not clearly shown. I propagated them through air layering at a friend's house many years ago, and they are actually planted underneath a large tree that I'm not able to identify just yet, and next to them is a variegated ficus tree that was also generated through the same technique. It was while I was attempting to do some air layering on the ficus trees, I noticed that the sides of the trees that face the slope have no foliage, and the branches were dried due to the shade of the trees above them and the vegetation growing up next to them, while the other side facing the sunlight has lovely foliage. This goes to show that plants respond to sunlight. Biologists and botanists alike describe this natural response or behavior as phototropism. I've also been observing the other plants within my local environment for many years and noticed that the trees at the base of a slope and those in a depression, or what we call gully here in Jamaica, tend to grow very straight and tall in most instances because they are moving in the direction of sunlight. I would strongly advise that you think about the light requirement of your plants before you place them in a permanent location, because you might not be able to relocate them and end up with regrets. In order to avoid this regret, we need to consider what is necessary for plants to thrive in the place or places where we are going to put them. And some of the basic requirements include water, light of course, air, as well as nutrients. Now for the purpose of this presentation, I'm just going to be focusing on the light requirement. But before I do so, I'm going to briefly speak to the matter of phototropism that came up earlier on, so that everyone can be on the same page where light is concerned as to the growth of plants. Charles Darwin is best known for his extensive work on evolutionary theory, but his brilliance extended to many other types of science, including the study of botany. He was extremely curious as to why plants grew toward light sources. This phenomenon has been observable in the real world for as long as human beings have been participating in agriculture, but scientists before Darwin assumed that plants were simply growing toward a heat source. Darwin and his son devised a brilliant experiment in which they grew 5 seedlings. One was grown as normal for control, one had the tip of the plant snipped off, one had a transparent cap on the tip, one had a light blocking cap on the tip. The last plant had a light blocking cap at its base. Next, they placed a single light source for all the plants. The plant with the tip snipped off, and the plant with the blocking cap on the tip did not engage in phototropism and didn't respond to change in the light environment. This led Darwin to conclude that the tip of the plant is responsible for engaging in phototropism process. Darwin published these results along with many others in his book entitled The Power of Movement in Plants, and you can always go and check it out if you want to know more. Now you may be asking the question, how does phototropism happens? It occurs when the photoreceptors of a plant detect that a light source could be accessed by bending the plant. A chemical called auxin concentrates on the shaded side of the plant, causing the plant cells to elongate, which changes the direction of the plant's growth. So that's all to it. It's very important that plants get the maximum amount of light that they need in order to survive. And plants require light for photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert light, oxygen, and water into carbohydrates. The energy that is derived from this process is responsible or required for growth, production of blooms and seeds. Without adequate light, and I'm not talking about direct sun shining on the plants now, carbohydrates cannot be manufactured, which lead to the depletion of the energy reserves and eventual death of the plant. Here are a few indicators that will tell you whether or not your plant is actually getting enough light. 1. When plants are not getting enough light, they don't produce enough chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is the green pigment in the plant leaf or the foliage, and you can know something is happening to your plant if the leaf is supposed to be green and it turns yellow, or in some cases white. Now, a lack of light may not be, or adequate light may not be the only factor that contribute to this. So over time you need to work out the problem. So if it's not a lack of fertilizer or something, then lack of light could very well be, or poor lighting could be, the reason why the plant is responding in this way. 2. The stems become leggy. So you may have some plants just growing long and thin and there's no branching, and they appear to be reaching towards a source of light. It's a typical example that the plant is desperately in need of some light. And earlier on I made reference to phototropism, so this is a typical example of, or the best way to describe phototropism. Plants without sufficient light may also drop their leaves, especially the older ones. So if you see a sudden change in the foliage, that could be an indicator that something is not right. And remember now, falling off the foliage may not necessarily mean that the plant is not getting enough light. There could be other reasons why. So you have to observe the plant and then diagnose what the problem is and treat it accordingly. In order to adapt to their shaded environment, some plants may change their foliage. Basically similar to what I was saying earlier on. So the foliage is supposed to be variegated, and what you find is that it becomes a solid color, especially if it's in an indoor space. then it could very well mean that the plant is not getting enough light. Plants that need more lighting may grow at a slower pace, and so you need to know your plant in such a way so that when you're not seeing the performance, you'll be able to say, I've been fertilizing and I've been doing all of these stuff, but something is missing. And then you will know that perhaps you need to change the position where you actually place it. So before you acquire a plant, you need to know all of these requirements in order for it to perform at its best. And I also want to underscore this point. Too much light, and I'm gonna be focusing on the direct sunlight now, can have a negative effect on the plant as well. So when you say the plant need light, or I need to put it out in the sun, I need to take it off the veranda and put it out in the sun, that's not a good thing, because it, over time, exposure to the sun rays can actually cause the leaves to be scorched, or some amount of bleaching to take place. So you have to be careful. It's just like some persons who have light skin. They cannot just go and sit in the direct sun, because over time it can have a negative effect on their skin. Plants are just as sensitive as human beings because they are living organisms. I know that this is not a preaching channel, but I'm going to yield to the prompting of the Lord, nevertheless, and add this component to this feature. Just like how plants require light from the sun for their survival, we cannot survive without the light of the world, and I'm talking about Jesus. In John 8 and verse 12, the Bible quotes him saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. And if you notice, in the account of the creation story outlined in Genesis, the first thing that God created was light, because he knows nothing can survive or thrive in darkness. And even though this passage is well known, I'm going to read Genesis chapter 1 from verse 1 to verse 5 for emphasis. And it says, In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Light is very important in every aspect of our lives. And I had an experience that really helped to underscore how important it is. I remember a few nights into planning this feature, the power went for a few hours. And while I was sitting in the dark, it was very discomforting. At one point I had to just go and lay down in my bed. And this really underscores how important light on the planet is to our survival, because the plants out there, without the aid of the sun, they are not able to produce so that we can feed from them. And in the same sense, I make the connection with the spiritual side and say that we cannot survive without having the presence of the Lord with us. As much as how we think we can make it on our own, we cannot make it without Him, even in a time such as this. And so the spiritual element is just as important as the physical side. And I am making this impassioned appeal to the person who has not yet come to this realization that they need to move in the direction of the spiritual light, which is Jesus, because only Him can help you to live a balanced and a fulfilled life. I want to thank you for taking the time out to come over to Virtual Gardening 101, the place where we dig into the digital soil and reap real results. This is a new channel, and I'd really appreciate it if you could give it some support by, first of all, liking the content and sharing it with somebody, because the aim is to bring about awareness. I welcome your feedback in the comment section, and you could give the channel a further boost by subscribing as well. Once again, I want to say thank you for stopping by, and I'll catch you in another one.